And we want to welcome to the show Dame Marilyn Waring. Marilyn, thank you so much for joining us today. I very much appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure, Pat.
Yeah, we wanted to talk to you about the People's Select Committee. I
Yeah.
believe that's it. We keep thinking about that music from the People's Court. Dun, dun, dun. It's not that. It's the People's Select Committee. And maybe before we even have a chat about why don't we have a chat about the what? What exactly is the People's Select Committee?
Okay, so it's a collection of 10 former women members of Parliament, fairly representative across the political parties
Yeah.
that they were part of, to hear the evidence and the information that should have been before Parliament when Parliament passed such a substantial piece of legislation, basically without evidence.
So this is the changes to the Equal Pay Act, the Equal Pay amendments that they're doing.
Yes.
Under urgency, bit of cloak and dagger, pre-budget, fairly obvious now because they had to fill a $13 billion gap. And many would say, Marilyn, and happy to get your thoughts on this, a pretty undemocratic process as to what they did to change this, change parts of the law that have been around for in excess of 50 years. Your thoughts?
Yes. Well, I'm old enough to be reminded. I remember people like Margaret Wilson in battle for the 1972 equal pay legislation right
Yeah.
back then. And as I started to listen to the debate, if you're an old hand at this, it becomes very obvious really early that there is no evidence behind this. And there's a kind of a hidden part on the Bill's website. I doubt that many people go there because you have to click a number of times.
Mm.
And it's about the evidence that had been adduced before this policy intervention. And I'm just writing about this for the spin off, so I'll go into more detail there.
Sure.
But there's only 3 pieces of research that are listed there. One is a piece that Health New Zealand itself commissioned on the care workers, actually on the methodology that was used to arrive at
Mm-hmm.
the care workers' totals. And the people who are writing that report say things like, well, there was no way we had all the written evidence in front of us. There's no way that this is a rigorous report because half, that is, the unions, wouldn't talk to us. There's no way this is a good report because the terms of reference were too tight and
Mm-hmm.
we weren't allowed to report on A, B, or C. So there's that one which has all of this caveats attached, but which marginally, the remnants of it can then be seen to support this legislation. The other 2 pieces, one is a piece from the Human Rights Commission. It triangulates its researchers. It's extraordinarily rigorous, and it's about the care and support workers. And there is nothing in that piece of research that supports the bill or the act. And then the third piece is a really major piece of work where research was conducted with social workers and their employers before the social workers pay equity resolution, and
Mm-hmm.
then afterwards, and all of it, including the employers, supports the process, what they arrived at, the fact that they're not scratching around for employees anymore, people stay, etc. So I don't know, just might be very, very lazy cabinet ministers these days, which I tend to think is, pretty general. But I can't imagine, like, if I was a minister and I was putting through a piece of legislation and half of one of the things that was supposed to be my information base was all that supported it, I would have pretty much scrambled to get rid of the rest or find something. And that gets you into it. Then they're wrong about whether or not it impugns any rights. In New Zealand, they only ask questions about ILO or labour rights. They don't ask about the Convention on Discrimination Against Women. As you go through this, really your mouth just falls more and more wide open. And what you see is this whole event. Oh, there's a question that says, who did you consult with?
Yeah.
And the answer actually is no one. Or the answer is only these other government departments. So we just talk to ourselves in a room. And I'm a researcher of old, over the years, there's many things that parliaments do that, I don't agree with, whatever. But, I do like them to adduce or produce some kind of evidence and to have not treated me like a complete pumpkin.
Yeah.
Well, this time I'm a complete pumpkin. That's what they, and they just go for all the cheap tricks, So the cheap tricks are, comparing a social worker with an air traffic controller, And I taught social workers in the Bachelor of Social Work. It takes 4 years. And I taught social workers in the Masters of Social Work. And it takes 5 or 6 years. Air traffic controllers do less than a year of training.
Right.
And 4 weeks of that is sitting at home interviewing yourself. They're not required to have any major academic qualification, and pretty much all the skills that they need, like concentration, capacity to find decisions quickly, ability to act on evidence. I've been in and out of the Welsh, British, Australian and New Zealand job descriptions of air traffic controllers, and I can tell you right now, I'd much rather have a social worker as an air traffic controller than an air traffic controller as a social worker.
It sounds like what you're also saying is the quote unquote, air quotes around here for our audio audience, the work that this government did before making this legislation was setting up the questions or ideas themselves that they knew the answers for, so they could have the outcome they wanted to be able to defend what they're doing.
Well, I don't even think they bothered with that. Because they don't set up a relevant question vis-a-vis pay equity, except this part about the cost. And this is a real mystery, because for year after year in the budget, this great phrase that a lot of people aren't familiar with, but it's called unquantifiable fiscal risks. So for years, pay equity has landed here among unquantifiable fiscal risks. And unquantifiable fiscal risks are things like, recovery from a natural disaster, floods, treaty claims, especially, let's say, the Tenths Trust in Nelson or in Ngāpuhi. These are unquantifiable fiscal risks. So you get for years and years pay equity listed as an unquantifiable fiscal risk, and then all of a sudden it has these numbers attached to it. So those of us who know these things are sitting here going, now, how on earth did they arrive at these numbers, and who arrived at these numbers? Mm-hmm. Did they just project the comparator wages? So they just used the highest pay rate of the comparators and then tried to push that. When you visit MB and Treasury websites, there is no evidence at all about who arrived at that amount of money and how they arrived at it.
Right. The People's Select Committee, I'm interested as to how that's going to function, how people are going to participate, and what do you think it will do? Are you just doing this to basically embarrass the government, to show them what they should have done? Like, what's the reason behind the People's Select Committee?
So it's each woman that I called, I simply said, were you satisfied with the evidence that was collected? And nobody is.
Right.
So this is supposed to be a democratic process, and even if you happen not to be on the as it were, the side that wins,
Yeah.
if sufficient evidence is adduced, I mean, it's not something David Seymour is ever interested in, but we saw that with treaty, and now we're seeing it with the regulations bill. But evidence is pretty critical in a democracy, and we want to produce that evidence. So we're offering the people who would otherwise have appeared before a select committee to come to us. So how we're going to work? So the very first hearing will be in Wellington on August the 11th, and that is the one where we will all be there in person. From then on, throughout August, September, and October, we will be holding hearings on Zoom. We have a rotating chair. We are unbelievably endowed, or just people are coming out of the woodwork. So we have a committee clerk who is somebody who worked in the clerk's office. We have a Pacific consultant who is Karenina Sumeo, who was the former EEO commissioner in the Human Rights Commission. We have, as it were, a departmental representative, Amy, who was the lead in the Public Service Commission on pay equity. And we have all of these people flooding in, offering to volunteer their time, and we have lots of them working for us already. So we're taking this very seriously. We will write a report based on the evidence we hear.
Yep.
And the evidence that is sent to us. So this is not a situation where any one of the 10 of us has got a little barrow to push and somehow or other think they're going to slip it in. This report will be entirely based on the evidence.
So you said October, November on Zoom. That means I would assume that the report will be out early first quarter next year, possibly, which of course is then an election year. How does that going to impact? Because this will keep this in the headlines until election year, won't it?
Well, at the moment, we're saying December. We want to have finished a draft.
Yep.
If it's ready to go, it goes. It's like we're not, this isn't a situation where you just hang around for the fun of it. That's not why people will have spent their precious time, submitting to us. So as soon as it's finished, it will go. The Zoom, everybody will be able to tune in to the very first day of hearings and then to all the Zoom hearings as well. We already have several groups who are going to gather as groups, one in Hauraki, one in Napier, who will appear for us. And we expect to hear from a lot of the 33 unions who were effectively disenfranchised by this legislation. And a lot of the people who made submissions to the 2018 legislation, we're expecting to hear from them as well.
When this report comes out, what do you expect it to do? How will it be received?
Well, I guess that depends on who your audience is. The government has said that it expects to continue with pay equity claims, so they've started all of them all over again. And obviously, since they had no evidence for this legislation, they will need evidence if they're going to continue with pay equity settlements. So it will be useful for them. It'll be useful for everybody who needs to write a party election policy moving into the next election. But I think that it will also be a considerable comfort. I know that's a really strange word to use because you've just, tossed people's lives all over the place. But to understand that they've had a voice, that it has been heard, that it has been reported on, and that the New Zealand public can see what would or should have been before Parliament before enacting this legislation.
Marilyn, we hear from this government that they want to get the number of smokers down whilst they're cancelling Smoke Free 2025. We hear them say that they're interested in the safety of workers in the workplace while they're changing WorkSafe regulations. We hear them say that they are very, very keen to increase the use of te reo while they're getting rid of te reo from government agencies, and it goes on and on and on. If someone asked you the question, does this government have women's interests at heart, how would you answer that?
No, it doesn't have women's interests at heart. But I think that's very simple, isn't it? I mean, I think we're going to be able to demonstrate in front of the committee that neither the minister nor the Ministry of Women's Affairs were consulted in this. And although there is probably little or nothing they could have done, it's still a major or snobbery of a ministry that does its best on behalf of half of the people. I don't think, there's an unbelievable arrogance about this particular government. I mean, at different times, lots of government or government ministers get, very arrogant. But this one is breathtakingly arrogant. And when the arrogance comes with ignorance, it's really incredible to watch.
Mm. What do you think of Christopher Luxon as a leader?
Well, I don't know that he is a leader, basically. Look, we know, a whole group of us know, that the way that Christopher Luxon runs his government caucus makes Muldoon look like the most democratic man on the planet. You cannot put items on the agenda for caucus. You cannot argue with ministers in caucus. There is no debate goes on in caucus. The idea that anybody might cross the floor, and my caucus, we really did it for, like, it wasn't just Minogue and I. There was Ruth Richardson and Dale Jones and Derek Quigley and your end of the Norman Jones. There were people going backwards and forwards across the aisle. We were allowed to have a conscience. We were allowed to have ethics and principles. You might pay for it, but there's all kinds of nefarious ways in which you get to pay for it. But it was a very, very different operation. And we know that simply does not happen in Luxon's caucus. Is it because he's chicken and because he doesn't know anything? I don't know what it is, but it's going to be an interesting year next year because you have so many national MPs who won constituency seats on really tight margins. And if they start to rebel, because they'll be able, very soon they'll start to smell the tide going out, and that might be the way in which National rekindles any energy at all, if it finally lets its caucus have voice.
Yeah. A bit of an existential question, maybe. Why do you think a woman would vote for this coalition?
Because she is economically very satisfied and has no issues about where her income and livelihood is coming from, that she has in her intellectual endeavours mainly studied what I would call patriarchal subjects, like economics, for example, which is just totally imbued with patriarchy. That she is a migrant who has believed all the racist kind of diatribes around Te Tiriti, and many migrants come from very split nations, so you can understand why that would have some kind of resonance with them. Because it's habit and they've never thought about it before. But yeah, I think this coalition is behaving in such a way that quite a few of those women will think about it, especially the ones who live in Remuera, by the way.
I was speaking to Craig Rennie this morning, and when he knew I was speaking to you, he wanted to pass on my best. As he said, he was having, his words, he was having a fangirl moment thinking about you being on BHN tonight. So just pass on those, because if you look at your CV, Marilyn, you know, crossing the floor for a nuclear-free New Zealand, Association for Women's Rights and Development, author of, including other things, If Women Counted, the New Zealand Observer on the UN Commission on the Status of Women, your CV today reads like a Green Party MP. What do you think of this current national government? And are you comfortable saying if you were going to be a minister in this parliament, where would you sit?
Oh, well, I wouldn't sit with any of the first thing is that I would never, ever do that to myself and go back there.
Yeah, gotcha.
It's a
Fair.
really cool and disheartening place. And yeah, you know, one of the things that interests me is this way in which, and they got really hoist on their own petard, really. The Greens are in fact the only party in its opposition to the waka jumping legislation who understood that you might arrive in Parliament and that representing your constituency might be far more important than representing your party. And that's one of the reasons they didn't go with the waka jumping legislation, then got left, you know, with having to implement it. Pretty much all the other parties are shut down on you doing your own research, on you being a true representative of your constituency, etc. If I had always said that in Parliament, and even when I was there, that if I was ever to take a cabinet portfolio, it would be the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Gotcha.
And the reason why they give it to Winston is then you'd be out of the country most of the time. Yeah. So you wouldn't have to be wearing everything else that's going on.
Marilyn, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. One little last question, and not to overly simplify and minimise this very large-scale, difficult conversation of government, but if I met you for the first time in an elevator and we were doing the elevator pitch as we went down on there, so it's 30 seconds, how would you describe the current government that's running this country?
Scared to make the major decisions that need to be made about revenue, falling over backwards for lobby groups that none of us care much about, like the smoking lobby or the landlords or those who want to further devastate the environment. Do you need any more?
I think you've given it to us. Hey, I know you're a bit sick today still, so we do thank you so much for giving us some time today. And I very much look forward to seeing the People's Select Committee, what it does, what it reveals, and the response you get to it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you.